Hello, today we're going to look at getting your split. So there's a lot of videos out there about stretching to get your splits that are dangerous for a lot of young dancers. It's very simple to look at the muscles that we need in order to get a full split. Those muscles are really stretching the hip flexor and the hamstring on the front leg, the hip flexor on the back leg. But I'm going to give you a few tips as we go through this about other muscles and what we're doing as we stretch. So let's start with a really good hip flexor stretch. So your hip flexor, otherwise known as your psoas. You have a psoas major and a psoas minor muscle. It's super easy to stretch this. You're actually just going to kneel. I like to say like you're proposing to someone, very square. Ankle underneath knee, knee directly underneath hip. Then you're going to scoop your booty under, tilting your pelvis. My sternum is still lifted, my chin is still up. Then, without rounding the shoulders forward, you're going to drop your chin to your chest. This is a phenomenal way of actually lengthening through that chain of muscles, and you'll feel it deep inside this hip where you're stretching that psoas. If you already have a flexible hip flexor and this stretch does not feel anything for you, you can start to bring your front foot forward and you can press your pelvis a little further forward. But as you do this, don't allow that tailbone to stick out towards the wall behind you. This is no longer stretching the front of the hip in that psoas muscle and hip flexor. This isn't really doing much of anything. So you want to keep tailbone pulled under in order to get that hip flexor. This is your arabesque, your needle, your soda shah, your leaps, whatever you want to call it. This hip flexor is what gets those back extensions up nice and high. The further you get into this, we can also even look at a runner's stretch. So runner's stretch is a great one. A lot of people teach it with the back foot lifted. Yeah. This is fine. I actually prefer to keep the back foot down and just continually think of pressing the hips down towards the front heel. So we're getting, once again, front of the hip and psoas stretch. So that's the back leg, right? But a lot of times you'll see some dancers who have a nice high back leg, but the front leg drops on many of their leaps. That comes from the hamstring. So the hamstring of that front leg. To stretch the hamstring, I'm sure we all know this one, we rock back, we flex the front foot. Here's what you need to know about this stretch. If you round the spine, I have now brought the connection of my hamstring closer together. So it's no longer being stretched. All you're stretching here is your low back. So in order to isolate the hamstring and get a good stretch in it, I want you to stick your tailbone out to the wall behind you. So now I'm in a flat back. This is something you can do facing side to a mirror, getting a look at it and going, am I truly in a flat back here? Then from there, think of your sternum bone, reaching for your big toe, and keep that foot fully flexed. If the foot isn't flexed, then once again, that chain in the back is relaxed. We're gonna get a deeper stretch if the full chain is engaged and lengthening. So flex that foot, long spine into your hamstring stretch. Now your hamstring is also known as the bicep femoris. It's got two heads, meaning two muscles running right next to each other. So there's one on the outside called the lateral head of the bicep femoris. To engage in stretching that one, all you're gonna do is take your front foot and turn it out. So heel is still planted, toes are rotated outward like we're trying to stand in first position, right? So this is really good for anyone who's training in a modality like ballet where you're gonna do more things turned out. You really wanna get that lateral head of the hamstring. But I always recommend doing both because it's the full hamstring, right? It's got two heads, we need to stretch both of them. So then as we start to look at going into our split, another thing I want you to think of is that turn out, turned in. I hate when people have one leg turned out, which is usually that back leg. We like to just turn it out, keep the front leg parallel, and this is our split. This is where we get those open hips that you know your teacher doesn't like anyways, yeah? So let's start with parallel. If we're doing a split parallel, I like to recommend keeping the back foot with the toes on the floor, heel up. So we can really find that parallel and trying to drop the pelvis down between those two legs. This helps, for me especially, get a deeper hamstring stretch and that deeper front of the hip stretch. You can always keep the front foot flexed here also. That's once again getting more into that over split kind of stretch without stretching out any of those ligaments. This is still in our muscles. Thinking about the hip bone staying square, thinking about the rib cage and the belly button pulling in. Yes, we don't want to do leaps and be like this. We want to be nice and tall. Now, when you start to point the back foot, that's when we can start to find that turnout. But I can also do that in the front leg. That's happening femur in the hip socket now, not in the hips and in the pelvis. Yes, just femurs in the hip socket. Now, what attaches muscles to our bones? It's our tendons. Our tendons play a major role in our flexibility, but also in our strength. We have a tendon that connects the muscles that point our foot and flex our foot on the top of our foot to our big toe. As dancers, we spend a lot of time on that demi point, on the half toe, and that muscle gets really tight and that tendon gets really tight. Here's one of my favorite stretches, because we want pointed feet in the air, yes? So you're gonna take that foot, point it all the way, reach your hand for those toes, and pull your big toe down towards the floor. This is giving that whole chain, once again, we're talking about the muscle chain, the whole chain from the top of the foot through the big toe, a nice big stretch. So as we continue to stretch in our splits and work on our leaps and our saut de chasse, we won't have a flexed foot in the air. We'll have a nice and pointed foot. When I danced, we called them bananas, biscuits, bananas. We want a banana foot, right? So stretch that tendon, work on that banana foot, and you can always do the other side. Now, if you have your split and your problem is you can't get it up in the air, it's not working when you leap. That's a strength problem, not a flexibility problem. Check out some of the other videos on how to build strength, especially in your hip flexors. Okay, bye.